And we are wrapping up our series on friendship today. If you've been here the last few weeks, it's been a 4-week series. We started out talking about the idea that our identity should be rooted in Jesus, that everything should center around him. And if that's true, then friendships won't take too much of a toll on who we are, right? They won't be the main thing, and other people's emotions won't control us. And in that, we also looked at this idea that we are wired for connection. Each one of you in this room, God made you to connect with other people. And the next week, we looked at how do we then be a good friend? Because we saw that friendship starts with us, right? If we are available, we're actually present with people, we're humble, and we're transparent, we're real, then we can be a good friend to others. And then last week, you looked at different things we can prioritize as we look for friends, right? We can prioritize proximity, we can prioritize character, consistency, transparency, accountability. And if we do those things, we can then find good friendships. We also, in that, when we talked about consistency, what we looked at, if you remember, is that friendships take time. Right? Some studies said that it takes over 200 hours to move into a deep friendship with somebody. But often what happens is we give up because that's a lot of time and something happens in that friendship. Conflict arises or things come up. And when the conflict hits, we tend to just break the relationship and go, I don't want conflict. That can't be a good friend. And so what we want to look at today is if we're doing all those things, if our identity is in Jesus and we're trying to be a good friend and we're finding some good friends, what do we do if we run into conflict in our friendship, right? How do we walk in conflict in a healthy way? Because the truth is, conflict is a part of life, and we're always going to experience it. I remember when I was in 6th grade, all right, I had a friend, his name was Ross. I've talked about him before. He and I met in kindergarten. And Ross is the kid who did a backflip and broke his kneecap. Some of you have heard that story, right? Yeah, it's a great story. But Ross and I, in 6th grade, we had a crush on the same girl, right? It's a big deal. And when I was in middle school, back in the early 1990s, or the late 1990s, early 2000s, no big deal, before the change of the millennium, we used to go to the skating rink in McKinney all the time, right? And so we would go to the skating rink basically every Friday night. My friends and I would go, which seems wild to think about now. But we would go, our parents would drop us off, and we both liked this girl, and I was kind of like talking to her, right? And then at the skating rink one Friday night, Ross took some coins, went to this little vending machine, and he bought her a ring out of this little vending machine and gave it to her. And I remember hearing about this from all my friends. They came up and they're like, dude, you're not going to believe what Ross did. And I was like, oh, man, I should go fight him, right? But instead what I did, because I like to handle conflict really well, is I just skated away angrily and wouldn't ever talk to him. And I just acted like I was really mad. Because, I was 6th grade. What does it really matter, right? But I acted like I was mad so that I could get attention, right? And I wanted people to feel bad for me because that would be awesome. And here's what's funny. Ross and I never talked about that, as 6th grade boys would do, right? We never talked. Also, we eventually stopped talking to that girl, and we just continued to be friends, right? So I ask you, is that a really good way to handle conflict in a friendship? No, not at all. Now, it worked at the end of the day, but it wasn't a good way. We could have handled that in so many other ways. And what could have also happened is our friendship could have ended, right? I could have said, I can't be friends with that guy. I don't trust him, right? And that happens a lot in our world. And so the question is, how do we wade into conflict in a healthy way? And there's 4 concepts I want us to look at of how do we wade into conflict. And the first one is this. If you want to have healthy conflict in a friendship, you need to assume the best. Right? Assume that person has your best intentions in mind. Because most hurts are just misunderstandings. And what often happens is in our imagination, we go to the worst case scenario. So we go, oh my gosh, my friend said this thing about me. That means they're the worst person in the world. They've never actually liked me. They hate me. My whole world is going to crumble. I'm spiraling, and I'll have no friends forever, right? We tend to assume the worst, and then our imagination turns into anxiety about what's happening. But nothing's even happened. We don't even really know what's going on. We have this concept on staff here at Venture. We want to assume the best in other people. All right, so when they make a decision, we want to go, man, that person is walking with this Spirit. They love Jesus, they love this place, and they love me. And so I'm going to assume they made the decision with my best intention in mind, even if it doesn't feel like it. So an example, right? Tim, this is going to be funny because Tim and I both really don't like conflict, right? But say Tim and I are in a meeting, and I mention, hey, that song, Graves into Gardens, you guys know that song, right? I don't like that song, never play it again, right? And a couple weeks later, Tim were to put that in worship and start playing it. I could sit in the back and go, oh man, Tim knows I don't like this song. He's doing this because he's getting back at me. He hates me. He's being so mean to me. I can't believe he would play this song. I could start to go down that path, and I could assume the worst in him. Or I could go, okay, man, let me assume the best. I know Tim. I know, man, he loves Jesus. I know he's trying to be a good friend to me. He's playing this song. I mentioned I didn't like it. What's going on? Right? If I assume the best, it allows me to ask different questions. Do you guys see that? Instead of just spiraling and going, Tim's the worst, right? What could have happened is Tim didn't hear what I said. Or he could have gone, hey, I know Kevin doesn't like this song, but it really fits perfectly with what we're talking about. Let me have a conversation with him about it. And then maybe he just forgot about that, right? But he had a good intention. But instead, what I could do is assume the worst and then just be mad. What I also would tend to do, right, is then maybe talk with other people about that. And so the second thing we want to do, right after we've assumed the best, is you want to keep short accounts and address that person directly, right? So keep short accounts. If this is something that makes you frustrated, but it's not really that important, right, you can just drop it. But if you keep coming back to it, if you keep circling around to some hurt that a friend caused to you, this is going to sound crazy, go and talk to them. Right? That's what Scripture actually tells us to do, to go talk to the person who we have a frustration with. Go and talk directly to that person instead of the natural thing of going and talking to your friends about it. Right? Going to them and going, oh my gosh, can you believe Tim would play that song? He knows I don't like that song, and he's bold enough to get up on stage and play that. Can you believe him? Right? Instead, I could go and talk to him and go, hey, dude, you played that song. I mentioned that I don't like it. Like, what's going on? He go, oh, dude, I totally forgot, right? I can allow him to explain what's going on. Or we can actually have a conversation where conflict can start to be understood, and we can go, oh, this was a misunderstanding. Now, is it possible in that the person you go and talk to, they're like, yeah, I did that because I don't like you? Maybe, right? It's possible that happens. Maybe you don't need to continue to be friends with them in that case, right? But most of the time, that's not what's going to happen. Often, you and I and your friends make decisions based on themselves. They're thinking of themselves. So they're making a decision that they go, I think this is what's going to benefit me in the moment. Sometimes we can thus forget other people. And so if you sit down and you understand your friend's point of view and you go, hey, this is what happened, it starts to help you understand what they're thinking through. Maybe they were a little insecure. Maybe they made a decision because they weren't sure what was happening. And you can understand that. You can be compassionate and sit with them in that insecurity, right? That's how a good friend can walk in conflict. Now the question then becomes, what do you do if someone comes up to you and wants to gossip? right? What do you do if this isn't your conflict? It's your friend coming to you and going, oh my gosh, let me tell you about what happened. What do? Right? Often, the easiest thing to do is to jump in and be like, yeah, that person is the worst, right? But that's not what Christ would call us to do. And so I've heard another pastor talk about conflict, and here's what he would suggest to do, and I love it. He'd say, if someone comes and talks to you and they're talking about someone else, stop them, say, hey, I hear it sounds like you have an issue with that other person. Have you talked with them about it? Right? Just stop them and say, it seems like you have an issue with someone else. Have you talked to them? If they say no, say, man, I would suggest that you go and talk to them before you come and talk to me. And here's what you can also do. If you're so bold, you could say, I would suggest you go and talk to them. If you don't, I will go and tell them that they need to talk to you. That's going to stop gossip immediately. Right? Because suddenly your friend who maybe loves to gossip is going to go, I'm not gossiping to you because you're going to make me talk to somebody else. Right? But if you have friends who actually want accountability, like we talked about last week, right? Who want to dig into the hard things, they're going to appreciate that at the end of the day. That's going to make deeper friendships, right? And what I'd also say is gossip and wise counsel are different things, just as a quick side note. So if you come and talk to a trusted adult or a leader or maybe one of your really good friends and go, I'm having this conflict and this issue with somebody else. Help me figure out how to navigate it. That's different than going, hey, this person's the worst. Talk with me about how bad they are. Does that make sense? So you can seek wise counsel without gossiping. Right? But start by assuming the best, keep short accounts, and address that person directly. The third thing you want to do is be quick to apologize. So if someone comes to you with the conflict, you want to just be quick to apologize and say, man, I'm sorry that you interpreted that way. I'm sorry that I hurt you, right? Don't say that in a way that my kids tend to say to each other, like, I'm sorry that I hurt you, right? It just doesn't mean anything. I'd be like, actually apologize, man. I'm sorry that I put you in that situation. And then you don't have to say much else, because often what happens is we as people, when we apologize, we want to try and explain ourselves. So we say a bunch of words, right? I'm really good at this, apologizing and saying, hey, I'm sorry I did this, but actually I did it because of what you did, right? We tend to turn it around, and that's not helpful. What we're trying to do is seek understanding and seek resolution in a conflict, not flipping it around on the other person so that we look good. Right? So we want to be quick to apologize. And the last thing we want to do is we want to aim to be a peacemaker. If you know someone has a conflict with you, address them and talk to them. Understand what other people are going through. Seek out that person and go, hey, I feel like we have a conflict. Let's talk about it. Because typically we can tend to avoid people when we think they have an issue with us. But if we want good friends, deep friendships that love Jesus and are striving to grow deeper together, we can seek out that conflict and say, hey, I feel like you have an issue. Let's talk about it, man. I want to seek to understand so that we can grow in our relationship together. What would it look like if we did that? Instead of talking about that person, we went and talked to them. And here's the overarching understanding and idea. None of us are perfect aside from Jesus. And so you're going to upset people in your friendships. People are going to upset you, and they're going to disappoint you. And that's okay. We can work through that together. The verse in Colossians, it's Colossians 3. I want to read these verses, and I want you to think through conflict with your friends as you read these verses. Listen to this. This is verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen ones, holy and dearly loved. So as God's people, put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving one another if anyone has a grievance against another. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. Above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity, and let the peace of Christ, to which you were called in one body, rule your hearts and be thankful. What would it look like if as you walked into your friendships, that was the attitude you had? You were compassionate and kind. You were forgiving towards others as they had a grievance. And your friends did the same thing. And so when you had conflict, you just addressed it, talked with each other, and you moved on because you knew your friend loved Jesus and they loved you. What I also want to do is just a side note to say, this doesn't just apply to your friendships with your peers. This can apply to all of your relationships. Right, so what would it look like if you assumed the best and you were quick to forgive and you said sorry, you were quick to apologize? What would it look like if you did that to your parents? What would it look like if you did that to your siblings? Right? When your parents said something and you didn't agree with it, instead of yelling at them and saying, "You're the worst, you don't love me," you said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I hear you say that. Can we talk about that? I'm going to assume the best in you. Assume that you have my best interest in mind, even if it doesn't feel like it. Let's talk about that." That would be totally different than probably what the natural thing is that happens at your house, right? Or what would it look like with your siblings if you were slow to speak, right? And you were quick to listen to them and hear them and understand where they were coming from. You apologized quickly to them. You were compassionate to your siblings. What would that look like? It'd probably look different than it does at your house right now, right? And so in small groups, we're going to talk more about what does it look like to have healthy conflict in friendships. But before we do, I want to make one quick side note also. Conflict is different than bullying. All right? Here's the definitions. I want to read those really quick. Conflict is a natural, often inevitable disagreement or clash between opposing ideas, needs, or interests. Right? So it's a natural or inevitable disagreement. Bullying is unwanted, intentional, and repeated aggressive behavior involving a real or perceived power imbalance designed to harm, intimidate, or threaten another person. Conflict and bullying are not the same thing. But in our culture today, we use the term bullying sometimes when what we actually are experiencing is conflict, right? So if your friend does something and you don't like, we go, my friend is bullying me, right? That's not always true. Sometimes what we say is bullying is actually just conflict. So not all conflict is bullying, but some of your friends might bully you. Right? Some of the people that you think of as friends might actually be bullying you. The stuff that they do is constantly meant to intimidate you or make you feel small, and that's not okay. So talk to somebody about that. Talk to an adult about that, right? Talk to your leader. They'd love to chat with you about that. Or talk to that person. Here's what I would say is interesting. Most of those people who are being bullies probably don't know that that's what they're doing. Right? They are looking to lift themselves up just like a lot of us are doing. So they might not know they're doing that. You might bully some people and not know you're doing it, right? What would it look like for someone to talk with you about that? Now, on the flip side, there might be other people who are doing that and they completely know they're doing that, right? Talk to an adult about that, right? There's a difference between conflict and bullying, but if you're experiencing bullying, talk to someone about that. Don't just sit in that conflict. It's important to bring others into that, all right? So in small group, we're going to chat more about conflict. How do we handle that in friendships? So let me pray. Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for this time. Help us have some great conversations in small groups. We thank you that you, God, are the blueprint for loving, compassionate friend. And I pray that each of us, as we walk into our friendships, God, we could be understanding, we could be loving, we could be kind, we could show the fruits of the Spirit. And that as we walk into conflict with our friends, we would do it in a healthy way that can actually deepen and strengthen our relationships. So Jesus, we thank you. I pray for each student in here. I pray that they would have deep, Jesus-loving friendships. God, we love you. Thank you for this time. In your name we pray. Amen.